position actually looks pretty good in comparison to most programs, because most programs don't have the same level of success at other positions that Georgia does. I think it's a fair point that receivers still have a little bit of a wait-and-see approach to UGA, but that's only the same wait-and-see approach those players at all positions have for all programs. It's not easy to amass great talent. Georgia just makes it look easier at the other positions, as we're going to get rolling here on the other platforms and get rolling here in just a little bit. Mike Q on the subject of Julian Humphrey. We're going to talk more about Julian today. We really didn't do that yesterday. We were kind of busy on the show yesterday, so we didn't get we didn't quite get into the Humphrey thing as much, but we'll give Connor Riley a chance to talk about that last night. Tennille says Humphrey was in Christian Miller's ear last night. I did see where Humphrey did have the "y'all don't realize how good of a recruiter I am" type thing, and I think a lot of folks were saying, well, ooh, I wonder who he's working on. Well, Tennille says it was Christian Miller. That's kind of good. Jermaine King said he had the Mega Powers Georgia football analogy earlier. Jermaine, I can always count on you for that. All right, let's see. Anything else before we get going here? All right, so good stuff. We're going to get ready to get rolling here. So Connor Riley stops by. We have a lot of SEC news right now because there is a bunch of rumors out there. Really, this is the kind of the time of the year where about 80 to 90% of the SEC is pretty unhappy, and so we're going to try to figure out all the reasons why and kind of, what all this means. I love coaching rumors. There are a lot of those right now, so we'll cover all of that. Great stuff from Jordan Davis. And off the top of the program here, a statistical rarity for Georgia that speaks to just how special this season has been so far and just how good it might be before it's all said and done. That, to me, feels like a pretty good place to start. So what do you say we do it? We are all on the platforms now, right? All right, so what do you say we do it? It's DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. It's presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Dial 678-ESOG now for a solution to your foundation and waterproofing problems.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
For just a couple of minutes here off the top of the program, I want to talk about stats. Now, I have told y'all before, and I say this not just in an attempt to be humble and self-deprecating, although I think that's usually a pretty good thing to be, but I've told you many times before that there are a lot of stats that get thrown around in sports right now that are just way over my head. I see these numbers. I have no idea what they mean. And it's almost like at one point in my life, I used to try to understand some of this kind of stuff, and now I realize that in some circles, the conversation around statistics has just gotten so complicated that I might as well just give up and not even try. There's so many abbreviations and numerical whatevers that it's just beyond my ability to comprehend. And if you follow sports closely, especially college football, but all sports, if you follow sports closely, you've probably noticed some version of this too, that there's just kind of a nerdy language around sports that didn't used to exist. And you have every right to embrace it and get into it. You have every right to ignore it. I think you're free to do whatever you want to on that. The one thing I do want to point out, though, is that not all of this newfangled fancy stat stuff, not all of it is complicated. Not all of it is difficult to understand. Some of it is beyond my realm of capacity completely. Other parts of it, you hear the kind of math nerd guy make a point, and you're like, maybe that is kind of a pretty good point. For instance, let me give you two quick examples. Let's go back to like baseball years ago. Do you remember when the book Moneyball first came out? Even if you don't care about this kind of stuff, you probably have heard the concept of Moneyball before, the book, the movie. They made a movie about this. And like a simple concept of Moneyball is that when I was a kid, everybody made a big deal about batting average. That's the percentage of hits you get compared to the number of bats you have. And batting average is like a big deal. Who wins the batting title, blah, blah, blah. But at some point in time, batting average stopped mattering quite as much. And the reason why is, compare this. Say you got two guys, they both are hitting 300. But if this other guy's also drawing 100 walks per season, that's just a more valuable player because there's really no difference in getting to first via hit, getting to first via walk. And so therefore they started paying more attention to on-base percentage. That makes sense, right? Or let's say you got two players, they both go 2 for 4 in the same game. But the one guy had 2 doubles. Well, 2 doubles is better than 2 singles, so therefore slugging percentage means more than batting average, and to me that's kind of somewhat easy to understand. Or let's say basketball for a moment. Let's say that you're a 50% shooter from the field. You shoot a jump shot, you're a good jump shooter, you hit 50% of your jump shots. Well, it's obviously way better to shoot threes than twos, because if you're hitting 50% of them over the course of 100 shots, that works out to 25 more points for you and for your team. Therefore, 3-point shots are just more valuable than 2-point shots if we're talking about a consistent shooting percentage over the course of all of those shots taken. And that's one of those things that the math nerds have told us. And if you really stop to think about it, that's actually not super complicated to understand, and it kind of makes some sense there as well. And those same math nerds try to tell us some things about college football, and some of it's like abbreviation this and weird data formula that, and I think all that can fairly easily be rejected. For the most part, I do, simply because I'm just not smart enough to understand it. But not everything the math nerds have told us about college football is necessarily something that we should reject. Some of it, if you really stop and think about it for like 2 seconds, actually makes some sense. For instance, if you want to go back to when I was a kid, 80s, 90s, kind of growing up back there in that time, everybody made a big deal about total offense. How many yards can you compile over the course of a game? And we see these like staggering totals of total offense. But over the course of time, the math nerd has tried to explain why total offense necessarily, even total defense, but we're going to stay on the offense side of the ball for a moment, why that's maybe a little bit of a misleading statistic sometimes. For instance, if you run a lot of plays, then you're going to compile a lot of yards. But that doesn't necessarily predict how much you're going to win. Maybe you will win, maybe you won't. I think a pretty good example of this is Mississippi State. Now, Mississippi State here in this current version of college football is a pretty good team, and frankly, they've been better this season than I thought they probably would be. They rank very high in like total offensive rankings. How many yards they compile, they rank pretty high on something like that. They also happen to rank pretty high in number of plays run per game. That's what Mike Leach has been doing his entire career. But we also know this. Now at Mississippi State and at Washington State before that and at Texas Tech before that, that's not really a recipe for winning one way or another. I mean, it's a good team, hard to beat, but you're not going to really win a championship running that many plays, compiling that many yards. You put pressure on your defense, and eventually, for whatever reason, the offense just kind of gets stopped there as well. It just eventually gets stymied. That's not much of a recipe. So what the math people have told us, and this is where we get to Georgia, what the math people have told us is that what you really want to measure in college football is not how many plays you run and how many yards you compile, but what you do on a per play and per drive basis. How many yards you get per play, that determines how efficient you are. How many points you get per drive, that determines how explosive you are. I mean, doesn't that make sense that you're neutralizing for the teams that want to play really fast and run as many plays as they can compared to the teams that want to play a little bit slower? Because here's the one thing that you know. There's no free lunch in life anywhere. That what you do on one end of the spectrum in football affects the other things that happen for you in a game. And the one thing that you see over and over again is that if you're one of these teams like Mississippi State, the team that I mentioned before, that if you want to play really, really fast offensively, that'll help your total offensive numbers, but your defense is going to pay a price for that. We've seen that replicated in college football over and over and over again. So therefore, let's push that stat aside here for a moment, and let's look at one of the stats that I mentioned a moment ago, the number of points you get per drive, or defensively speaking, the number of points you allow per drive. And when you look at that, I think you see something really amazing happening for the Georgia Bulldogs right now. Now, I want to go to a guy named Brian Fremeau. He has a blog called bcftoys.com. Now, I want to give you this here for a moment. Like I said, this may sound complicated, but this is actually really easy to understand. Did you know that right now Georgia defensively is only, let me see if I can find this number, is only averaging 0.38 points per drive? Did you know that? That is such an obscenely low number, and you probably somewhat expected that to be true, that when an offense has the ball, on average, they are only getting 0.38 points per drive. It'd take them 3 drives just to even get 1 point against Georgia. That's how good Georgia's been defensively. But did you also know this, that Georgia is scoring 3.58 points per drive? Did you know that number is good enough for third best in the country, according to Brian Fremeau from bcftoys.com? That Georgia's got the number 1 defense when it comes to points allowed per drive and the number 3 offense when it comes to that same category. And did you know that really the only team that even comes close to matching that complementary on both sides of the ball is Alabama, which is second offensively, but just 14th defensively. Or you want to compare it to Ohio State for a moment. They're first offensively. You're probably not surprised by that, but they're just 20th in defense. Michigan's 10th offense, 10th defense. Cincinnati's 13th on the offensive side, 9th on the defensive side of the ball. But Georgia right now is the only team in the country that on that particular stat, how many points they're scoring per drive offensively, how many points they're allowing per drive defensively, they're the only team in the country in the top 10 in both, and Georgia happens to be in the top 3 in both. Number 1, defense, no surprise. Number 3, offense, that's probably a surprise to many. Now, let me explain to you how rare this actually is, because the same math nerd guy that gives us this data also tells us this, that if you want to go back to 2007, only a small number of teams have finished the year in the top 10 in both categories. And I believe we have this as a tweet, and we'll show this to you on the screen here for a moment. So Georgia's trying to join 4 other teams: 2010 Boise State, 2012 Alabama, 2013 Florida State, 2019 Ohio State. Georgia's trying to join those teams as the team since 2007 that could finish the year in top 10 in terms of points allowed per drive, plus top 10 in points scored per drive. Right now, Georgia is averaging a net of 3.2 points compared to their offense and their defense. This puts Georgia on par with some of the best teams of all time, the 2012 Alabama, 2013 Florida State teams in particular there in that particular point. Now, this kind of gets to what we talked about yesterday. Do you remember we mentioned the concept of DawgNation unification? And I thought we had a couple of video commenters yesterday that brought up a really good point. That the whole idea of unity in DawgNation is not about uniting around a player. No player. Not quarterback, not Jordan Davis, not anybody. DawgNation unification is not about uniting around a player. It's about uniting around a team. Or maybe even more specifically than that, it's about uniting around an idea. That college football teams rarely perform better than Georgia is right now. And when you look at teams that are preparing for the upcoming postseason, there is no team anywhere in a better position for what's about to happen in December and January than what Georgia is right now. Yes, there are teams that have played a little bit better offensively, but they played way worse defensively. And yes, there are teams that maybe they've come close to doing what Georgia's done defensively. At least they're within the statistical realm of what Georgia's done defensively. But you compare them offensively, they're not coming close to the nearly 40 points per game that Georgia's averaging right now. That this really is becoming a complementary football team. Somehow, some way, they figured out a way to get it done offensively, and somehow, some way, even against an explosive offense in their own stadium on Saturday, the Georgia defense just simply did not yield very much. That after these 10 games that you've seen from Georgia, you have seen something that's working at an efficient and explosive clip, the likes of which it rarely ever happens in college football. And when we talk about DawgNation unification, that's the idea we're talking about uniting around. That right now, Georgia's getting it done. And for those who've been paying close attention and see how successful it's been, the story told by those stats, I think those Georgia fans are really enjoying themselves. And slowly but surely, the rest of the folks kind of on the peripheral fringe are also starting to work their way into this there too. That, you know what? This may not be the exact version of Georgia I thought I was going to see, but the results for a college football team are rarely better than these are right now. Now, it's also fair to say that Kirby Smart talked a little bit about this on Saturday, because much the same way there's a statistical story of just how rare this has all been for UGA, there's also a more, I guess, eye test, broad idea of this too. We know that Georgia's gone 8-0 in SEC play for the first time in program history. Gone undefeated against conference foes for the first time since 1982. This late in the season to be undefeated, not even the 2017 team that eventually made the college football playoff and played for the national championship, not even that team was undefeated this late in the year the way that Georgia is right now. All of this really is, however you describe it, using stats or eye test or whatever else, all of this really is the makings of a special season thus far. But as Kirby Smart said, what you've done to this point does not assure anything that's going to happen after that, and it's probably a fair thing for us to all consider here right now. This is Kirby Smart after the win against Tennessee on Saturday.
10-0, undefeated in the SEC. That's where we've gotten. It makes no guarantee for what's going to happen in the future. We got a lot of guys that we've got to try to get better and improve. And you know what I love is the being in that locker room over there beside me. They all know that. Nobody thinks they've arrived. There's things we can work on and get better at, and they'll continue to do it.
So Kirby Smart says there's no guarantee of what happens here. Totally agree with that. We should all consider that. There's nothing that can be said. There's nothing that can be done to relieve the tension of, when you battle Alabama in the SEC championship game, or when you battle big name brand team in the college football playoff. There's nothing that can be done to make that less nerve-wracking. But the guarantee that you can have is there will be rare instances when Georgia's better positioned for success in the postseason than it is right now. And this also goes back to what Smart said there, what we also talked about yesterday. It is fairly obvious that Smart's having a really good time coaching this team. Somehow, some way, the inner workings of this program, the kind of invisible stuff that we don't see from the outside, even those of us who are in the media and try to get as close to this as we can, the stuff that's only apparent if you're in behind those closed doors. It's only apparent if you're on that sideline. It's only apparent if you're working and striving and straining and grinding with this team each and every day. That somehow, some way, that has impressed Smart in a way that not every team is going to. He clearly likes the direction this is all going, even if there's no guarantee that it finishes with the result that we're all hoping for. So I can't promise you anything. I can't promise what December's going to feel like. I can't promise what January's going to feel like. But I can tell you this. The last 10 games have been pretty fun to watch. And the team that's preparing for a championship run, I'm not sure I'd change one thing about it, even if I could, because the formula, the chemistry, the way in which these pieces fit together has had the making of special results all season long, and you know what? The fun on all of this could just be getting started. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. We're glad to have you with us, no matter how you get to us today. Video, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. That's 10 a.m., 9:45, DawgNation.com, and the DawgNation app. However you're watching us on video, appreciate that. Of course, all the podcast platforms there as well. Apple, Spotify, the Google Player, a bunch of other platforms there too. Radio Noon, Athens Sports Radio 96 The Ref. Just really appreciate you being with us, and a big thanks to our friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia for making it all possible. Foundation waterproofing issues. If you're a homeowner, these are things that matter to you because they can be signs of bigger damage on the way or bigger issues on the way. Water creeps in, cracks in your walls. Those are the kinds of things that'll make you think about ESOG when you see them. That'll be a trigger to you that, oh, yeah, BA was talking about this. Here's that water coming in. Here's that crack on the wall. Let me find out what's going on with this. Engineered Solutions of Georgia, the one to do that with, because they got 2 full-time engineers on staff. They are smart people when it comes to understanding the structural integrity, I should say the structural integrity of your home. They know it better than anybody does. They're also proud partners of UGA. It's fun to support and do business with those who support the Dogs. We also are very appreciative that so many of you have supported Engineered Solutions of Georgia because ESOG has been longtime friends of ours here. They've helped keep the lights on here around DawgNation for a long time there as well, and we are so grateful for them and grateful to you for your support of them. So make sure you check them out today. Simple number to dial. Simply dial 678-ESOG now. That's 678-ESOG now. That'll get you in touch with Engineered Solutions of Georgia. All right, we have a very busy program coming up here today. A lot to tell you about. There's big news around the SEC. We'll obviously cover that. We'll get Connor Riley here coming up as part of a Kroger Fresh Take, looking back at the win there against Tennessee, looking ahead to what's going to happen December, January for these Dogs, and the kind of complementary football that I just described. Georgia obviously on a historic clip defensively, but offensively, at least on the basis of some of the smart snap people, not too far behind in that category there either. What does all that mean? We'll let Connor tell us about that here as well, coming up in just a moment. Before that, though, I want to go around the doghouse, and it's presented today by our friends at Georgia's Own Credit Union. And I got to tell you, obviously, Senior Day is always a big deal for me, even in a weird year like this. And I thought it was interesting to hear Kirby Smart discussing this yesterday, that it's almost difficult to define even what a senior is in 2021 because of the extra eligibility from the pandemic year. And plus, college football's just kind of gotten stranger in this regard anyway. But even still, even in an unusual year where, some guys might technically be seniors, but they might still come back or, whatever else going to happen here. I'm just kind of a sentimental fool. I mean, I just am always going to be nostalgic about, gosh, it seems like just yesterday so-and-so was showing up at Georgia. Now he's walking on that field at Sanford Stadium for the last time. I just reckon, I guess I'll always just be that kind of guy who just gets kind of sentimental about stuff like that. That's just kind of who I am. And if I feel that way, generally speaking, you better believe I feel that way about Georgia nose tackle Jordan Davis for the kind of player he is, the kind of dude he's been as a leader for this team. And when you think about everything that's going on there, I just think it's really pretty remarkable all the way around. And there continues to be this chatter out there of, hey, Jordan Davis for the Heisman Trophy. In fact, you see his actually improving. He's becoming a little bit of a shorter shot to win the Heisman Trophy. There's still a lot that has to be happening there. He's not amongst the 3 or 4 top favorites, but I mean, we were told, when we first started this campaign for Jordan, weeks ago, we were told it was an impossibility to even get this off the ground. You can't do that. Defensive tackle can't be mentioned for the Heisman. And there'll always be experts at what can't be done. But in this particular case, Davis, with his attitude, with his level of play, with his impact on the Georgia team, continues to put himself in this discussion. Let me show you a couple of examples this year real quick. I forget which one of these we have first, but I think as a Georgia fan going to Knoxville on Saturday, I guess the AJC got a picture of this homemade sign. A lot of this is digital. A lot of this is social media. There you go. That's our buddy Manatee Jetpack showing us this Prize Picks billboard. I guess I'll give Prize Picks a little free love here with the hashtag Jordan Davis for Heisman. Now, I kind of jokingly said, even if they're using the wrong hashtag there, because obviously our O-Fish hash is hashtag JD to NYC, but it's nice to see Prize Picks getting on the bandwagon, even if they're not quite using the correct hashtag on all of that. And I appreciate Manatee Jetpack sharing that there on Twitter. Also, there were Georgia fans in the stadium on Saturday with their own homemade version of the hashtag JD to NYC, and our buddy Bass and Dog shared that with me. I love to see Georgia fans having fun with this. I love to see the media and the betting houses and everybody else kind of getting on board with this there as well. It's obviously been a huge growth here over the course of the last few weeks, couple months. It's been fun to lead the way there on that. It was kind of cool yesterday to hear Jordan Davis also just kind of sharing his own feelings about, what it's been like to watch this grow around him, and he was as customarily humble as you would expect him to be, which is really the reason why he's been the avatar for this Georgia defense all season long anyway. This is Jordan Davis on that subject from yesterday.
It's definitely unexpected. It's definitely something I've never expected in a million years to be a part of this. And, honored, I'm blessed, and it's just one of those things that, you sit back and you think about, and you're just like, wow, it's definitely not by myself. I definitely had a team of people, and, they deserve all the recognition because I couldn't have done it without them. It takes a village to raise a child, and I'm glad that I chose this village.
Takes a village to raise a child. I'm glad I chose this village there at UGA. That's great stuff. And obviously, every time another player has a big game for Georgia, I always get these tweets of, I'm not even sure Jordan Davis is even the best player on this defense. I think so-and-so might be. And my response back to that has always been that Davis didn't become the avatar for this defense because he was unquestionably the best player. He may be the most physically dominant just simply because he's such a imposing physical presence there in the middle of the defense. But this has always been a representation thing for Davis. Davis has always represented what we like about the Georgia defense, that everyone probably gets less statistics than they would like to have, less playing time than they would like to have. Everyone has shared glory that could have gone to somebody else. In fact, to be completely frank with you, we have seen players leave Georgia, go to other places, and have a lot more individual glory, pats on the back, and success than they would have gotten had they stayed at UGA. It's very easy to be a big fish in a small pond. But a lot of these Georgia players have decided to do is, I'm going to stay here at UGA. I'm going to share my glory with the team. I'm going to share my statistics with the rest of the team. And we're going to be a great team defense where really kind of nobody outshines anybody else. I don't think that anybody embodies that more than Jordan Davis. That's why Davis has become the Heisman representative here for UGA. That's why we made the push for him, not because he was undeniably the best, but because he was unquestionably the guy who represented the idea of the Georgia defense better than anybody else ever could. That's what that's all about. And obviously, as Davis gets ready to play his final game in Sanford Stadium on Saturday, much the same way I've got, always, endless reams of sentimentality about stuff like this. Sounds like Jordan Davis may have a little bit of that going on for himself there, too. This is JD on being between the hedges for the last time on Saturday. Good stuff from Jordan once again.
It's a bittersweet moment. Obviously 4 years ago, you hear a lot about how this journey ends fast and it almost ends as quickly as it started. But, at the end of the day, it's definitely one of those moments you got to savor and you really appreciate for being a part of this program.
So I just love that from Jordan Davis. I think that's just simply incredible. Very good stuff. And as I said before, I think that fans should always take a moment to appreciate Senior Day because there are guys like JD who've obviously been a huge part of the success of Georgia, but there are other guys who, if you make it 4 years at Georgia, you have been through a grind. You've worked hard at practice, and almost no one has played as much as they want to, and yet almost everyone who sticks with it through the end, almost everyone would say they're better off for the fight. They're better off for the competition. They're better off for having allowed themselves to become better men because of the instruction and the training and the just preparation for life they've gotten here at the University of Georgia. It's one of those things that sometimes you're a little late getting your seats, or you're, busy trying to go to the concession stand or something like that. And I understand that. Have been the same way when I've sat in the stands before. But if you get a chance, try to sit there, try to enjoy that, try to appreciate what a moment that is for guys who dreamed of playing big-time college football, who got there, and in the case of Jordan Davis, who've gone on to great careers. But in the case of some of the other players who'll be walking with Davis there on Saturday, just to have worn this uniform is a true honor, and all of them deserve our applause, and I know they'll get it from UGA fans there. It's Around the Doghouse. It's presented today by our friends at Georgia's Own Credit Union, and right now is a great time to find out about everything going on with Georgia's Own, especially we head towards the holiday season, because they've got those Visa Signature and Platinum cards. What a great time that is to use as you go into the holidays, because there are all kinds of big incentives for using your Visa Signature and Platinum card from Georgia's Own Credit Union. They can be used on cash back if you want that, merchandise if you want that, all kinds of things that just make your holiday experience so much better. Your shopping experience is going to be so much better. Using a Visa Signature or Platinum card from Georgia's Own can be incredible to earn all those bonuses and incentives. Plus, you can get $150 as well in some cases as a special thank you for getting signed up there on that. So make sure you check out georgiasown.org. That's the website, georgiasown.org, for complete details on everything that's going to apply for this today. Check out the Visa Signature and Platinum card from Georgia's Own Credit Union online, georgiasown.org. All right, so busy show for us. We're around the SEC before we're all said and done. Hot coaching rumors, more heat on Dan Mullen. Very interesting question about Alabama as it relates to its upcoming game against Georgia. We will cover all of that before we're done. But for now, let's dive deep on UGA. Big road win against Tennessee. Preparations the next couple of weeks to get ready for SEC Championship, which we presume will be Alabama. Let's cover all those bases right now. It's a Kroger Fresh Take with Connor Riley. Good to have all of you with us here today as well.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So we'll say hello to Connor Riley. A lot we want to discuss with him over the course of our time here. Obviously, Connor and I were together as we made that trip back into Knoxville over the weekend. So it seems like it was as good a place as any to kind of start there right there. And Connor, I guess let's just kind of begin with this if you don't mind. It was a game that I thought that Georgia would be challenged in. The beginning of the game, that was clearly true. There were, noisy atmosphere, big offensive, drive to start there for Tennessee. But, man, as a fan of this team, which I am, I was incredibly impressed with how Georgia weathered that. I love the line from Kirby that they're not just here to take Tennessee's best shot. They came here to throw shots as well. And Georgia on both sides of the ball, I thought, did that. To me, the game against Tennessee was a really validating performance. Not the best team that Georgia's played, but it was a tough spot to be in against a team that had, some opportunity to do some things against Georgia. But for the most part, UGA just kind of shrugged it off. I was very impressed with what I saw against Tennessee. How did you feel about the game?
Yeah, the game played out how I thought it was going to play out, and hopefully everyone can hear me. We're still working through some new technical issues in our new studio, but we think we've got this figured out. James Cook was an absolute star on Saturday, and I think that game showed you're going to see a lot of him in the SEC Championship game, probably against Alabama, because he is a difference maker, even on a field with a number of talented players. I was really impressed by what Xavier Truss was able to do when he came in at guard for Warren Erickson. Erickson leaves the game as he was sort of one of the many players battling the flu. I think Truss brings a certain level of physicality to that offensive front that I think this group could really benefit from. Channing Tindall was out of his mind on Saturday. 3 sacks, pretty easily show that he's a guy who can replace some of the things that you lose with Adam Anderson out there. I thought the quarterback discussion is all but over now. This is pretty clearly Stetson Bennett's team going forward until proven otherwise with this play. And as far as the game in and of itself, I think my pre-game prediction was 42-10. The game sort of played out how I thought it would. I thought Georgia would take a little bit to adjust to the tempo, and then they moved Chris Smith, to the star position, a place he had really only repped at for about a week in practice beforehand. And that totally flipped the game. Tennessee had no answers from that point on, and really this defense continues to show why it is the best individual unit in college football.
I talked about James Cook a lot yesterday, and I'm sure that conversation will continue, and I was very impressed with what I saw from him. There's also a part of me that wants to say, hey, one of the things we sometimes see at Georgia is there's the big moment offensively from a player, but maybe he doesn't follow that up in the next game. Now, this is a little bit different than I don't care if James Cook does anything against Charleston Southern, nor do I really care if much of anybody does anything against Charleston Southern or Georgia Tech. But, for instance, you saw Jermaine Burton have a huge game against Missouri, and while he did have a nice catch against Tennessee, wasn't quite as much of a factor in that game as he'd been the week before. I really hope that what we saw from Cook against Tennessee is the kind of thing that can be replicated. There's always going to be this thing of who's the guy you want with the ball in his hand with the game on the line. I've even talked about that on our show here going back a lot of the last couple of weeks. Well, I thought that James Cook on Saturday took a major step towards maybe being that guy. I just hope this is the kind of thing that can be replicated in an SEC championship game the way it was put on display against Tennessee.
Yeah, I would say James Cook showed a lot of what DeAndre Swift did in that 2018 SEC championship game where Georgia was able to get him the ball in a variety of ways. And really, in going back and watching Cook in that game, it was the way he was attacking in the rushing game, how there was no delay. He was hitting the hole hard and then just breaking through there, and Tennessee clearly did not have the athletes that were able to keep up with him. I think the game plan that was used against Tennessee is replicable for James Cook. Obviously, I don't think Alabama is going to match him up with a linebacker there when they split him out wide like Tennessee did, as Alabama learned that the hard way last year. But I think what we saw from James Cook was sort of a replicable performance in the sense that it wasn't like he was, playing out of his mind and doing things we had never seen him do before. We've seen him split out wide and catch long touchdown passes. We've seen him break long runs before for touchdowns. And so because of the manner in which James Cook played, I thought there was a confidence there that maybe we hadn't seen for the first time. But he's done all those things in games before. It was just probably the first time we had seen him put truly everything together. And I think to your point, we don't need to see him against Georgia Tech or Charleston Southern, but I do think we're going to see him quite often used against Alabama in the SEC championship game.
I thought the Tennessee game was an example of what I started the show by talking about today, which is that Georgia is achieving on both sides of the ball a level of success that's actually a lot more rare in college football than people probably think that it is. I think people have this imagination of, well, I'd love to have a defense as good as the one that Georgia has, but also scoring 55 points a game there as well. The fact of the matter is, there just really is no comp for that. There's no college football team that exists right now that does that. The teams that are better than Georgia offensively, such as Oklahoma and Ohio State, they are nowhere near as good as Georgia defensively. Even an Alabama team that I think stands as Georgia's stiffest challenge isn't as complimentary, dominant in both offense and defense as Georgia is. And in fact, if you go with the Brian Fremeau dude who's written for Football Outsiders, has his own blog, things like that, only a small handful of teams since 2007 have found a way to be in the top 10 in both points allowed and points scored per drive. And right now, Georgia stands to be the best of all of them with a net of 3.2 points per drive, comparing the offense there and the defense. That's a level of success that I think, Connor, ought to be easy for UGA fans to rally around, and I'm hopeful that it will be.
Yeah, again, this defense is just and granted, Tennessee did some things, though. I would point out again, that last touchdown came late in the game, and sure that Georgia still had its starters out there, but it was 41-10. Tennessee did not score in the second quarter, did not score in the third quarter when there was a chance for them to at least extend that game a little bit there. And offensively, I know Stetson is not exactly a popular player, but you have to like what he continues to bring to this offense, specifically that mobility. And I'm not saying he's going to run away from Will Anderson, but I do think you probably feel a little bit better about his scrambling ability and ability to move better than JT Daniels, who even his hardest supporters would say he's going to be a sitting duck back there. And so if you have questions about this offensive line, which while, yes, they haven't given up very many sacks this year, I think a lot of that is because of the scheme and the way it is designed. I do think Stetson has continued to show he's going to make 2 or 3 throws a game. The touchdown pass to James Cook, some of those third down passes to Donnie Mitchell that are winning football plays. And sure, he's going to have 2 or 3 plays in that same game that hurts you a little bit. In this game, it was the missed throw to Brock Bowers that should have been for a touchdown pass and ended up being an incomplete pass. But I point out on Saturday, even on the road in a hostile environment in Neyland Stadium, sort of like we saw against Auburn, Stetson didn't really have any turnover-worthy plays. And against Alabama in the SEC championship game, I think that's going to be really big there. He, weirdly enough, on the road has mitigated his ability to make those sort of turnover-worthy plays. And sure, he's not hitting on all of those. I do think that Stetson has continued to show that he, when asked to do so, is able to mitigate the turnovers that we've seen him make.
And listen, people obviously know that I'm certainly partisan. I want Georgia to win, and I think some people think, well, therefore, because of that, I'm just going to say whatever needs to be said for the positive for UGA. But honestly, I think history would show that's not really true. I mean, if you want to go back to 2019, I talked plenty about that offense there at that time not being good enough to win a national championship. That's a team that was struggling to score, 21 points in SEC play. Very good defensively, but the complementary football, they were barely a top 20 offense there at the time. Being great defense when you're lagging there offensively, you're just creating too many opportunities for a game to get out of hand on you, for a team to find a way to score on you. You can't really match that. That if Georgia was scuffling offensively the way that it was in 2019, for instance, I think that the quality of this defense would be mitigated somewhat, and Georgia's chance of winning a national championship, I think, would be less than they currently are. But when you're averaging less than 10 and you're scoring nearly 40, I don't mean to be simplistic here, that's a pretty good recipe for success.
Yeah, you mentioned Moneyball earlier. I recently watched it again. It's a tremendous film, and sure, Georgia doesn't have a Jason Giambi type offense, but what does it do? It gets on base. It scores points. And now against Alabama, it's going to need to score touchdowns. It cannot settle for field goals like the way that it has this season. And I think Kirby Smart knows that. I think we've seen in bits and pieces him be more aggressive in terms of going for it on 4th and short or 4th and manageable situations there when asked to do so. So, again, this offense, it's not the most stylistically pretty, but it is darn effective. They are averaging just under 40 points a game this season. If you had told anyone that, and without saying the quarterback, if you said Georgia's averaging 39 points per game 10 games into the season, you'd be like, that's the perfect kind of offense we want to have. And so because of that, I believe they've now scored 30 points in every SEC game they had played this season. So while the offense, it might not stylistically look how so many people want it to, it's continued to get the job done. And I think the big difference between the 2019 team you mentioned there are dudes who are capable of making those plays. James Cook we saw on Saturday, Jermaine Burton the weekend before, Dominic Blaylock, maybe a George Pickens, though. I'm going to be really interested to see what kind of update we get on Pickens this week, because if we don't sort of see him ramp up and sort of get the clearance he needs to play, I become very, very dubious that we're going to see him in the SEC championship game. But Brock Bowers, Darnell Washington, they have dudes in the receiving core in a way that they didn't in 2019 that I think make it more plausible to see this Georgia team scoring 30 points against Alabama in the SEC championship game, something I think, and I know you think, they're going to have to do to win.
And let me make kind of a small point here that it's beyond just what Georgia's averaging from a points per game standpoint. For instance, if you score 60 in one game, score 10 the next game, well, you're averaging 35 points per game. But I'm not quite so sure what I would expect you to do in game 3 if your performances were so, on wildly different ends of the spectrum. It's the fact that Georgia has consistently scored as much as it has. It's averaging about 38 or so, but it's also scoring about 38 in every game. They haven't failed to score less than 30 since the week 1 game there against Clemson. And it's that week-to-week consistency that matters far more to me than what the actual average is. Because I said before, averages can be kind of a funny thing in sports, but there isn't a moment this season where that Georgia offense hasn't shown up. Now, you can find a 5-minute window in this game, a 5-minute window in that game, or whoa. But the fact of the matter is there is a consistent level of performance that's shown up every single Saturday since week 1.
Yeah, and go back and look at that last drive before the first half ended against Tennessee. Stetson had 2 big third down conversions in that drive. They faced a 2nd and 20 and turned that into a first down. He efficiently moved them on that drive before hitting on the big play to James Cook to make it 24-10 and really just sort of suck the life out of Tennessee there. And that game, for all intents and purposes, was over when Georgia took that lead, that 24-10 lead there. That's the sort of thing where you saw when JT did it against South Carolina, it was like, oh, whoa, this is finally the Georgia offense we all thought we were going to get. If Stetson's able to do that, and you hear analytics people talk about, sandwiching the half, winning the final 4 minutes and the first 4 minutes, if Georgia's able to do that, where they're able to get a stop and then get a score and then come out in the second half and then get a score again, now they weren't able to do that against Tennessee, but if you're able to do that, that makes winning football games a lot easier. As a New England Patriots fan, that is something they have long stressed and long executed at a really high level, and I'll be interested to see if Georgia's able to win those sort of middle 8 minutes in the SEC championship game.
All right, let's change our topic here and talk about the Alabama Crimson Tide here for a moment, since you mentioned the SEC championship game. I thought one of the real telling moments from the Kirby Smart press conference yesterday was the question related to, as Jamari Salyer works his way back to health, is there a chance that he plays guard instead of tackle? Do they trust Broderick Jones enough to leave him there? And Smart was non-committal about the entire thing, essentially saying, in no uncertain terms, that he just was not going to give his opinion on that as of right now. To me, this is the biggest issue. I think the single biggest question external to Georgia about whether it wins a national championship is, can it block the outstanding pass rusher for Alabama, Will Anderson, which means you've got to have your 5 best offensive linemen. There were a lot of people that were very happy with Xavier Truss's insertion into the game against Tennessee on Saturday. Some have even compared that to when Ben Cleveland came in late in the season for Georgia in 2017. I did have somebody privately reach out to me yesterday who knows this kind of thing, and he kind of pointed out some reasons that would make him suggest he wasn't maybe quite as happy with Truss as maybe some other people were there as well, kind of casting some doubt on that. Whether that's true or not, the question here is does Georgia have the capability of keeping Anderson off its quarterback, whether it's Bennett, who we presume it will be, or maybe it's JT Daniels for whatever reason, but blocking Will Anderson may be the number one external question facing whether or not this team wins a championship or not.
Absolutely, and you look at what Georgia wants to do offensively, especially with Stetson Bennett and their long play action passes, attacking that 15 to 20-yard middle part of the field. Well, to do that, you've got to get the ball out efficiently while also being able to protect 3 to 4 seconds. You don't got to hold them up forever, but you can't. You're not. Stetson Bennett has not been the guy who lets get the ball out of his hands as quickly as possible. And so because of that, Warren McClendon is going to be asked to have a huge game there. Jamari Salyer, who I think when he gets healthy is going to move back to left tackle. I don't think it's going to be Broderick Jones. I think there's a better chance you see Xavier Truss starting or at least playing significant snaps in the SEC championship game rather than Broderick Jones at this point. I just think they feel better with Jamari Salyer out there at left tackle than they do with him at guard. And I think he is pretty clearly one of Georgia's best 5 offensive linemen. And so because of that, and look, I like Kirby Smart. I'm very dubious of Pro Football Focus, but I have seen some of the statistical numbers on Jamari. I believe he has not given up a sack allowed all year. If Warren McClendon and Jamari Salyer play up to their potential and are able to limit, because you're not gonna totally prevent Will Anderson, a player as dominant as he is, from making plays, but if you're able to limit the impact that he has on that game, I think you're going to go it's going, as you point out, going to go a long way to Georgia winning that game that day.
And I'm just going to tell you right now that I think Georgia is in as good a position to win the SEC championship as it possibly could be. And if you win the SEC championship, I would say that you're the odds-on favorite to win the national championship as well. I think that Georgia is in as good a position as it can be. But I don't have any assurances this is going to be an easy win for UGA. I expect a hard fight from Alabama. This is an Alabama team that's been imperfect to me this year. There have been moments when it's kind of downright looked very non-Alabama-like. That does not give me a lot of comfort. I don't mean this from the woe is me, Georgia, other shoe's going to drop. That's not what I'm talking about. I still think Alabama, even with the level of play that it's shown this year, which is probably less than what it's been maybe the last couple of 3 years, I still think this is an incredibly formidable challenge for UGA. Every stat points to that. Your own eye test, I would say, kind of points to that. This is one of those things where there is nothing I can do to deflate the tension that exists around this game. It is just going to be a Pier 6 brawl to determine, who kind of gets a guaranteed spot in the college football playoff.
Yeah, it's, if you're Georgia, obviously you have a lot of demons with this game, with this opponent. And it's Michael Myers, it's John Wick. Until they are dead, until they are officially confirmed, until I have their severed head in my hand, you still always are going to think there's a chance that they're able to pull this off and pull it out, just given we've seen them do it so many different times. And Alabama is still a champion, and while, yes, Texas A&M was able to beat them and they have looked at times vulnerable this year, you got to be the one that knocks them out. And with the way the SEC West is sort of set up, a.k.a. Bo Nix having season-ending ankle surgery, that, in my opinion, is all but going to, I think, put Alabama in. They only have to win one of their final 2 SEC games. And, look, that Alabama team knows, hey, as long as they beat Arkansas and Auburn, we still control our destiny in terms of winning a national title. And Nick Saban, for all the issues that we have seen at Alabama this year, Nick Saban is still the best college football coach of all time, and he's absolutely going to have his guys ready to play that day.
We did not talk about Julian Humphrey yesterday. I want to do that with you more in just a moment. Georgia did get a big commit there on Friday. I also remind folks, this is our Kroger Fresh Take with Connor Riley. Of course, Kroger doing so many great things for you as we get ready for the upcoming Thanksgiving season. They're getting you covered on all of that. So everything you need to save big and really make those dollars stretch here this year. We all know that getting the most out of our Thanksgiving spending is a big deal to us here this year. Kroger does a great job with all of that. So stop by your local Kroger store, get stocked up on everything you need. I'm very happy to say that we're already doing that around our house, getting all those great sides and the turkey and everything else that goes along with making a great Thanksgiving. You're probably not surprised to know around our household, we just love a Thanksgiving, and we are ready to enjoy a great one here this year. So I hope you are there too, and trust Kroger and all that. They're also open to 4 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day there as well. So that last-minute thing that you need, big thanks to the folks at Kroger for sticking around and making sure we're able to get that there on Thanksgiving Day. So trust Kroger for all of that. Connor, I mentioned before, Julian Humphrey. It's obviously a flip from Florida, at least technically speaking. At one point in time, Humphrey was a Florida commit, had decommitted, and pretty quickly was on the path towards committing somewhere. And obviously Georgia was the leader and ultimately secured that commitment. How big of a deal is this for UGA? Obviously Humphrey's one of those guys that has a great time on social media talking about all the guys he's going to bring with him. But as a player, how big of a deal do you think this is for Georgia?
Yeah, it's Georgia going into the state of Texas, getting a top 100 overall prospect, and I would note as well, landing and Georgia still got more guys to land in that secondary, but Marquise Groves-Killebrew, a fellow 2021 cornerback commit. It sounds like he suffered a very serious, I believe, ACL injury. And so recovering from that is going to be something worth watching going forward. So landing a guy like Humphrey who could potentially come in, I'm not saying he's going to play right away, but what we've seen from these Georgia cornerbacks, and you even look at a guy like Jalen Kimber before he got hurt this year out of the state of Texas, I think could potentially help them come in and play well there. You have Bear Alexander, who obviously has Texas ties there as well. So I think it's a continuation of Georgia doing really well in the state of Texas, and then building what I think could be a really special secondary when you consider Malachi Starks. I know he's listed as a linebacker. He's going to play safety for Georgia when he gets here. You potentially land 5-star safety Kamari Wilson. You potentially land 5-star cornerback Jaheim Singletary. You got 4 top 100 defensive back recruits, and Groves-Killebrew right now is just outside that top 100 as well. That's a really, really strong secondary class, especially for one that Georgia could potentially have to replace 4 starters from this secondary. Now, those guys aren't going to play right away next year, but it's really important that they continue to replenish that secondary there, and I think landing a guy like Humphrey, even at the expense of Florida, to make it doubly painful for the Gators there, I think is another win for Georgia on the recruiting front.
Yeah, they just absolute evisceration by Georgia, by Kirby Smart of Florida, and obviously around here we never get tired of seeing that. Connor, great stuff. Thanks for being here as part of our Kroger Fresh Take. We'll look forward to reading a lot from you at DawgNation.com in the days ahead. Obviously, we're getting ready for that SEC Championship coming up in just a couple of weeks' time, so we'll enjoy the chance to chat with you a lot more about that as it draws closer.
Yep, as always, it was a pleasure, B.A.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, we'll roll on there. Terrific stuff from Connor Riley. Also time now to go cruise around the SEC, courtesy of our friends at Royal Caribbean. And boy, when you think about Royal Caribbean, the thing I want you to think about right now is that amazing Odyssey of the Seas. You know, Royal Caribbean, just for years and years and years, has been setting a new standard every time it launches one of these new ships out of the fleet, and Odyssey of the Seas is going to be another example of that. We'll show you the video here of just all of the entertainment options on board here, the tremendous dining options there as well. I'm talking about like private specialty restaurants like Chops Grill, or just all the shows and the entertainment. I mean, this is literally it's like unlike anything that you could ever imagine, and when you see that on video, you know how special that all is. Royal Caribbean just setting a new standard, and obviously a lot of folks have been waiting to get back on the seas. They've been dreaming about being back on a ship again. Well, now it's time to do that. It's time to do that on a ship unlike any other you've ever experienced before. I'm talking about Odyssey of the Seas. What an incredible opportunity. What a thing that is. And when you turn to Royal Caribbean, when you think about Odyssey of the Seas, when you think about the cool things they have going on, one of the things we also want to tell you to do there as well is to trust somebody who knows all the inner workings of Royal Caribbean, a true Royal Caribbean expert, to make sure you get the best Royal Caribbean cruise experience. One of the reasons why we talk to you a lot about the Cruise and Vacation Authority, because not only is the Cruise and Vacation Authority run by 2 former Georgia graduates, but also they just know all the Royal Caribbean stuff there as well. In fact, let me put this on the screen so you can see this. Their website, their phone number, it's tcava.com. It's tcava.com. or you can give them a call, 770-952-8300. That's 770-952-8300. You should do your own search for this. Look at the Odyssey of the Seas. Look at all the great stuff that it's got going on. But then reach out to the Cruise and Vacation Authority and let them tell you more about Odyssey. Let them tell you more about why it's going to be such an amazing vacation for you. A lot of those itineraries, they also go to Perfect Day Coco Cay, which is a very hot thing right now. That private island in the Bahamas that's got the water slide, tallest in the North America, the largest freshwater pool in the Bahamas, the thrill side, the chill side. A lot of those itineraries from Odyssey of the Seas go to Perfect Day Coco Cay. So enjoy all of that and use the Cruise and Vacation Authority to help get that one booked. The information, as we said before, tcava.com or 770-952-8300. All right, now, SEC through time and Cruise around the SEC. Another very strong denial yesterday coming from Texas A&M coach Jimbo Fisher about the persistent rumors that LSU is not going to give up its pursuit of him as its next head coach. You know the backstory here. Scott Woodward is the LSU AD, former A&M AD, who hired Jimbo Fisher there. They've had a strong relationship, but even predating Scott Woodward, Jimbo Fisher has always had a lot of interest in Baton Rouge. He coached there, won a national championship there as an offensive coordinator in 2003, came very close to being LSU coach a couple of times, but as he said when he first took the Texas A&M job, it just never quite worked out for him to be able to do that. Well, a lot of folks wonder, well, is this the charm? Is this the time in which this actually happens? What Jimbo said yesterday, I think, should get your attention. It's worth considering. He talked about the recruiting class that A&M's about to sign. You'll remember on last week's show, on one of our days on the SEC Through, we talked about this there as well, that not only has A&M gotten the commitment from five-star defensive lineman Walter Nolan, but they are seemingly trending right now with guys like Shamar Stewart and Evan Stewart and other big names that you want to mention for this class of 2022. A&M seems to be the trending team for a lot of those big-name guys right now. And what Jimbo said is this: hey, given the class that I'm about to sign, I'd have to be pretty stupid to sign all these guys at A&M and then go coach against them there at LSU, which is not the same thing as saying I'm definitely never, no matter what, not taking the LSU job. But if that doesn't serve to kind of quiet some of that kind of stuff down, then literally nothing will. I'll also say this about the momentum for A&M in recruiting right now. I know that Saturday was not a good day for A&M on the field, lost to Ole Miss, and Lane Kiffin is on his way to a very impressive season. They're in the top 10 of the AP poll. They may be in the top 10 of the playoff selection committee poll there tonight. And clearly, this was a big game for A&M. They were not able to win on the road. Ole Miss kind of got that. But when you look at the entirety of the programs, the way they're unfolding right now in the SEC West, there's no doubt that I would still trust a guy like Jimbo Fisher to build my program over the flashier guys like Mike Leach, who also has a head-to-head win against Jimbo this year, and certainly Lane Kiffin, whose attention span seems to only be about 5 minutes long. That Jimbo is showing you that building a program is very, very hard. You got to find the right physicality. You got to find the right talent. Maybe the last thing you do is find that offensive firepower that gives you a chance to win games against a guy like Kiffin, who's got a quarterback like Matt Corral. But just because it's slowly building doesn't mean that it isn't building. And I think the recruiting momentum that is seemingly unfolding for Jimbo is worth your attention. Both is maybe a way of quieting down those rumors that he might take the LSU job, but also as a reminder of what the landscape in the SEC West is going to look like in future years. Connor Riley mentioned this a moment ago. This is also a story worth paying attention to, too. The Bo Nix, who's really had a pretty good season for Auburn, especially after being kind of the butt of jokes after the beginning of the year, is now going to have season-ending surgery, has had season-ending surgery, and so that means he won't be able to play against Alabama. Of course, Auburn has won its last 2 games in Jordan-Hare Stadium against Alabama. That would seem a lot more difficult to accomplish now, and with that, the SEC West kind of officially comes to an end, and also, it kind of calls into question what the final stages of the first year of Brian Harsin are going to look like there at Auburn, too. Said this before, that at one point in time, it seemed like Auburn was kind of distancing itself from the middle to lower tier pack in the SEC West, and now it seems like they're kind of firmly within that pack. That last week was kind of a regression towards the middle for a lot of teams in the SEC West. Also, the SEC East, kind of other than Georgia there too, you just got kind of this gravitational pull back towards the middle right now. Auburn is a part of that. Harsin's doing very little to distinguish himself during his first year, and that job gets even more difficult now with Bo Nix not available to him. Dan Mullen got some heat yesterday, as you might imagine, for the celebration for the win against Samford and the way that they kind of over-celebrated that. We said that was embarrassing yesterday. We believe that it is. He says, you're always expected to perform in this league. This week is no different than last week or the week before, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, when kind of being grilled on, how Florida is performing relative to expectations. He says, we played a very different schedule this year with a very different team and under very different circumstances. It's not like, this happened. This year hasn't gone the way we wanted to go, unfortunately, and you can point to a lot of different things why that has happened and different reasons for where we're at. But that's this year's team. I can't compare one year to the next because each team is so independent. That's a lot of words, obviously, say I don't really have an explanation for why this team, this group of players, has not responded to me. But that's clearly what's going on here. And that's the thing that's got to be concerning, that maybe you hire better assistants, maybe they recruit a little bit better, but some of Florida's biggest underachievers were at times fairly big recruits or big transfers or whatever else, that you almost worry about a high tune-out factor, that the Florida players just simply don't respect Dan Mullen. There are eerily similar echoes to what's also happening in Austin right now with Steve Sarkisian at Texas, where I think you're left to wonder, do the Texas players just care one rip about Sarkisian and what his vision is for that program? Is he reaching them? Are they responding to him? We're left to wonder if they are, if they aren't. And it seems like a very similar thing is going on with Dan Mullen there at Florida, that at a certain point in time, you're just not stepping up as a leader of men. And right now, that seems to be the biggest issue that's kind of plaguing Florida coach Dan Mullen. Finally, I'll say this. College football playoff top 25 re-released tonight. I guess one of the talkers that I think is going to come out of this is, I think there's a very good chance that both Michigan and Michigan State leapfrog Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati on the heels of another closer than it should be win against a bad team. This was a South Florida on a Friday night. That may be enough to boom both Michigan and Michigan State ahead of Cincinnati here. We may see that tonight. I also wonder, and maybe the committee will address this, maybe it won't, Alabama, no reason to think they won't still be number 2, but as a team that could still make the playoff after losing to Georgia in the SEC championship game, were that to happen, you almost wonder if the fact that the SEC West, Texas A&M's now lost again, that some of these teams in the SEC West are starting to regress here a little bit. I guess on the one hand, the Mississippi State Ole Miss wins looks a little bit better. Arkansas now is going to be ranked higher than it was last week, so maybe that gives a little bit of a boost to Alabama. But how the rest of this SEC West unfolds apart from what happens with Alabama, I think that's going to go a long way towards determining what kind of resume does Alabama actually have as a potential 2-loss team that's ranked number 2 right now and would like to still make the playoff, even if it loses the SEC championship game. The rest of the year for these SEC West teams, I think it's going to go a long way towards doing that. For instance, the team that beat Alabama was 11th last week, but they're going to be far lower than that this week after losing to Ole Miss. And does Alabama get hurt because of that, or do they get helped because the team that beat A&M was a team they beat up pretty good, Ole Miss, a couple of weeks ago? To me, Alabama is still very much a part of the college football playoff discussion, even if it does have 2 losses. But obviously that's kind of what some of the chatter is going to be like here over the course of the next couple of weeks. We'll make that cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Let me also say this here really quickly. A couple of things I want to make you aware of. First of all, our friends at BetUS. Obviously, later on this week, we'll make our picks against the spread on our Go With The Flow show. And it's the time of week when you start looking ahead to those upcoming lines. It's a little lighter week around college football. In fact, not even easy to find a Georgia Charleston Southern line right now. A lot of times, FBS, FCS foes, it's kind of that way. But there is still plenty of money to be made out there. And BetUS, the place you go to make it. Take advantage of your expertise, your knowledge, your ability to pick games. Take advantage of that with BetUS and become a winner before you even place your first bet when you use the promo code DN125. When you do that, DN125, the DN stands for DawgNation. The 125 stands for the 125% sign-up bonus you're going to get when you get that initial deposit in with BetUS. What that means in simple language is they are going to put more money in your account to begin with than you are. That's what BetUS does for you. They've lasted for more than 25 years. They've been America's most beloved sportsbook during that time, and you don't get to be that way unless you're taking really good care of your players, and BetUS will take really good care of you. So use the promo code DN125 at the website betus.com, and they'll get you set up, and you can have some fun here this weekend picking some games, whether it be college, pro, or anything else. All the other sports there as well. betus.com for a lot more on that. Then finally, there is this. So I told you about this yesterday. I want to remind you one more time about what's going to happen for the SEC Championship at the Home Depot backyard right next to Mercedes-Benz Stadium. It's our big Chase for the Championship tailgate there that day. We're going to be right next to the stadium. It's going to be as fun as anything we've done. It's going to be just an amazing opportunity where you get open bar with all the food you can eat there as well. Unbelievable entertainment. DawgNation Chase for the Championship T-shirt. It's from 12 to 3 there on that Saturday of the SEC Championship. That's December 4th, of course. If you go to DawgNation.com right now, right there at the top, there's a place to click into that. Get your ticket for that. Be there for that. These tickets are flying right now. I cannot wait to have all those folks with us for a huge day before the SEC Championship. Of course, big thanks to our friends at Kroger for making all of this possible. Our Chase for the Championship, DawgNation.com for more on that. It's going to be an incredible experience. Open bar, all the food you can eat. Fun, T-shirt, just great stuff. A big celebration. We believe the Chase for the Championship for Georgia starts in Atlanta. We think it ends in Indianapolis, and you can go along that road with us by being there for the Chase for the Championship tailgate presented by Kroger. So I hope to be able to see you there. Go to DawgNation.com, get your tickets while you can, and we'll be ready to party on SEC Championship Saturday right next to the stadium at the Home Depot backyard. All right, so good golden shoe today. Our buddy Mad Dog, always great in delivering these. Georgia has now won the SEC East and gone 8-0 in the league, also swept the East again. Mad Dog gets the golden shoe today because he brought back the old school Own the East hashtag. Do you remember we used to do Own the East all the time? That was always really fun. He also gives you the Sweep the East there. You see all the SEC East foes that Georgia beat up on. And reminiscent of what happened back in like 2017, 2018, Georgia winning all these division games. Back then, it was like by at least 14 points. This year, they won every division game by 17 points or more, I believe. That's a remarkable margin of victory. So, yeah, sweep the East, hashtag own the East for bringing back some old school DawgNation nomenclature. We'll give Mad Dog a golden shoe for that. By the way, speaking of one of those East foes, those lousy, stinking Gators, how about 347 days from now, we all meet back in Jacksonville and beat up on Florida again, regardless of whoever the coach is? That sounds like fun. We'll see you tomorrow on DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. And on video. Time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. We'll take your comments and remind you that R.S. Andrews is the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. So, admittedly, there's always a little bit of a thermostat battle going on in our house this time of year. The kids and my wife, they want it warm. I'm typically the kind of person that wants it a little cooler, although at night, I'm getting a little bit bundled up right now. It's cold. And so if you're worried about your heating system, get that thing tuned back up to factory fresh specs. You know you need to do that. Breathe a little more life into it. Your wife's been probably telling you, this thing's old, it's tired, it can't make it can't make the rest of the winter. Show her it can. Go to R.S. Andrews and let them tune that thing up for you. They'll get a little bit more life out of it, get it back to factory fresh specs, get you ready to go for the cold winter that's on its way. So check them out online, rsandrews.com for more on that. All right, we'll do Facebook, we'll do YouTube, we'll do DawgNation.com, and we will be gone. Let's see what else is going on. Jonathan Moore asked about Mullen being officially gone. No, he's not, and there's no indication that he will be gone. But he's just facing a lot of criticism. He's facing a lot of heat. Had they lost to Samford on Saturday, he would have been gone by Sunday morning, I believe. And the results and the way that Florida acted after the game may ultimately seal his fate, but maybe just not quite right now. Josh Brock also pointing out that he just got an extension, and he did, but the extension alone may not quite save him. But obviously that's one of those things that would make it, certainly Florida, slower to want to do that. But you got to remember this too, though. Some of y'all watch like Succession or some of these shows where like everybody's always kind of doing a power grab and everybody's always trying to like game out, what's the right thing for them to do. And, they're trying to, worry about their own power, their own position. This kind of stuff goes on in college football all the time there as well. And so everybody thinks, well, Florida's athletic director, Scott Strickland, Dan Mullen's kind of his guy. And that's true. But remember this, though. In a world where everybody's kind of obsessed with their own power and their own position, no one views someone else as more of their guy than they view themselves to be. And Scott Strickland is on the hook in a big way for a lot of big donors who he got to really pony up heavy contributions for the new buildings that Florida's building and all those facilities. And so Strickland, I think, is probably feeling a little bit of internal pressure to prove that he's his own man here, that he's not going to risk his own reputation to protect his buddy Dan Mullen. If anything, he's going to show his own ability to be tough and lead by how he handles the situation with Mullen. You better believe that if it comes down to protecting Dan or being a self-preservationist, Strickland almost certainly will choose to preserve himself if he can. Cody Taylor, I did not know this. So BYU's coming to Statesboro on Saturday for Georgia Southern. That's a fun game. I know it's a little bit of a lost year for Georgia Southern, but that's a really fun game. Good for BYU for traveling. Keith Finney says, in your personal opinion, do you think Alabama should be in the playoff with 2 losses? Here's my way of answering that, and this is probably going to make everyone mad. I think that Alabama is clearly one of the 4 best teams in the country. And I think that it is unfair that Georgia might have to beat the Crimson Tide twice because no one else would obviously have to do that. But just because it's unfair to Georgia doesn't mean that it's wrong. I believe the playoff ought to feature the 4 best teams. In almost any given year, at least 2 of the 4 best teams in the country are going to be from the SEC. So even at 10-2, it'd be 11-2. Even at 11-2, Alabama is probably still one of the 4 best teams in the country. So factually speaking, it's hard to argue for for that team not being in the college football playoff. Like I said before, that's not quite what maybe some people want to hear, but I do believe that if you're going to put the 4 best teams in the country, that's one of the 4 best teams in the country. Now, I've also said this, and this is another thing that's going to get people to disagree. And I'm not saying it to be intentionally trolling, but I'm just giving you my opinion. If I had the power to, let's say that I was named czar of Georgia football. If I had the power to go negotiate with Alabama, gentleman's agreement, I would say there's no need to play this game twice when the results could be whatever. Gentleman's agreement, we're going to play one time. It's going to be a national quarterfinal game. The rest of the playoff may be anticlimactic after that. But I would go for a handshake agreement with Saban. One game, winner take all. The other team agrees to eliminate themselves. I would do that. I would certainly much rather try to load up, beat Bama once, and then handle whoever's left over after that than I would be with the idea of you throw it all out there to try to beat them the first time with no guarantee of making the college football playoff if you lose. And I don't care what anybody tells you, there is no guarantee of that. And then if you use other sports as an example, specifically the NFL, when there's a rematch between 2 teams that have played, the second team wins more often than the team that lost game 1 wins more often than not in game 2. For whatever reason, I don't know. I'm just thinking it's hard to beat a team twice. So it's like, okay, so if Georgia were to win the SEC championship, but Alabama were to win the national championship, I mean, you know how maddening that conversation is going to be. But is it really? I said the same thing in 2011, by the way. It's like LSU being the first time, Bama being the second time, Bama strutting around like they're clearly the best team. But how does that prove anything? You split. You happen to win the second of those 2 games. Suddenly that's the one that matters more than the other 2. That's just madness. That's nonsense to me. So if I could agree to only play them once, I would. And take my shot there that way. This happens in high school football all the time. We're rolling into the second round of the playoffs here right now. Next week will be the quarterfinals. And it is fairly often that maybe the 2 best teams in the classification, because of how the bracket is set up, oftentimes they meet in the semifinals. That's not always a state championship game. So there's no rule that the 2 best teams have to play the final game. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the bracket dictates you play the game sooner than that. And so same thing could happen for that national quarterfinal game between Georgia and Alabama, de facto speaking, in the SEC championship. So factually, I think it's hard to argue against Bama being in the playoff, given the fact they're clearly one of the top 4 teams. And you got to be careful about the hypocrisy of, well, if Georgia were to trip up and lose the SEC championship, clearly you want them making the playoff as a non-conference champion, but you'd like to try to exclude Alabama on the basis of the same thing. So, as I said before, that's a little something to make everybody mad there on that. Shelton Tucker shouting out Lee County, obviously a tough team to beat this time of year. Winfred Steinspring says a loss for Alabama, they're not going to make the playoff unless several teams fall also. Yeah, I don't think it's quite that simple. I think that The Oklahoma loss probably helps Alabama a little bit. Cincinnati's continued struggles, to the extent they're even taken seriously, I think that helps Alabama a little bit. I think the fact that Notre Dame, a team that seems to be climbing in the rankings right now, the fact that it is just very, very difficult to make the case, even though I think the committee might do this, it is very difficult to make the case for Notre Dame in the playoff, knowing that you may have an unbeaten team that beat Notre Dame. That probably helps Alabama a little bit. There also may just be a little bit of Notre Dame fatigue, too, just given the fact they've lost big the 2 times they've been in the playoff. So, yeah, I mean, I think people are going to want to make this absolute statement that somehow Alabama's definitely eliminated, and I just don't think you can do that. I don't think you can do that. G. Grace, Bama boy, who obviously wants Bama in the playoffs, says, I want Oklahoma to lose again, Ohio State to lose again, and Oregon to lose again. Crow King 123 says Notre Dame won't sniff the playoff because they can't get past Cincinnati, and the committee doesn't even want Cincinnati to be in there. The Cincinnati loss is certainly a problem for Notre Dame, no doubt about that. I'm loath to say anything can't happen, but that is a problem. Tyson Kiever says the playoff should be the 4 best and deserving teams, not the 4 teams with the most potential. Whoever wins the SEC is in, and who doesn't is out. Tyson, I don't know if you're a Georgia fan or not, but are you going to really keep that same attitude if Georgia were to lose close to Alabama? Because most Georgia fans are not. Most Georgia fans want the door to swing one way on this. They want Alabama eliminated with a loss, but they don't want Georgia eliminated with a loss, and that's that. Jay Shipes, who's been a big supporter of Lane Kiffin, says I'm going to lose respect for him if he chases that paper and considers the LSU or the Florida job. I understand that, but if Kiffin's a real consideration at LSU, I mean, it's obviously a much more resourced position than what Ole Miss can provide. I understand the point that you're making. You've been a big supporter of Lane, but this is kind of the issue with Lane is he is a little bit of a short attention span type guy here. And obviously, I mean, we haven't really done as much on this in the show as we probably should because I keep thinking it's fake. But there's all kinds of rumors out there about Lincoln Riley's supposed interest in the LSU job, whether it was the flight tracker thing that left Norman to Baton Rouge the other day, which sometimes these things turn out to be something and sometimes they don't. You'll remember a few years ago when the plane left Athens, went to Fort Collins, Colorado, which is where Colorado State is located, and everybody thought that's Mike Bobo. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. We don't really know about all of that. The point here, though, is that plus other things have led folks to wonder if Lincoln Riley might consider leaving Oklahoma for LSU. That just shows you the resources that the LSU coach would have at his disposal, access to talent maybe being the most prominent thing there. The last 3 coaches that have coached at LSU have all won a national championship. That's a pretty big deal. Ray Johnson says we've got Charleston Southern this week, then Georgia Tech next week. He says should be healthy and rested and ready for Bama. Bama's got a tough road. I like our odds. Yeah, there's no question about it, even with an injury to Bo Nix. Having to play Arkansas, then Auburn, and then the SEC championship the following Saturday is a much more difficult challenge than Georgia, who really gets to rest as much as it wants. And there's just no doubt that you'd much rather be in the position that Georgia's in right now. And I think that's a part of this discussion. Mark Brantley says if Bama's capable of getting in with 2 losses, how in the world is Georgia eliminated with 1? That logic is logical. But see, here's the problem, though, Mark, is like there's only a small supply of logic even available to the committee, and they're just not logical people. They don't care. What's the line to quote Succession again? They don't get embarrassed. They don't care what any of us think about what they do. They don't get embarrassed by their decisions. So they would absolutely treat one team differently than another. And I've said this before. It's a little different now because Georgia does have so much better of a resume than Alabama does. But in a similar situation, I do think the committee might be kinder to Alabama on the losing end of the SEC championship than it would be to Georgia. That's not fair, but I could absolutely see the committee doing that. I think it's easier for Alabama, not now because Bama's lost already and Georgia hasn't, but in a apples-to-apples situation, I think it would have been potentially easier for Bama to make the playoff with a college football, with an SEC championship loss, easier for Bama to do that than it would be for Georgia because just Alabama's just got more cachet with that room. Paul Moon says the committee would absolutely be kinder to Bama than it would be to us. I think that's probably true. Thomas T-Bone says score predictions for Saturday's game. Boy, I don't know. I don't know. I can tell you that I know nothing about Charleston Southern. I guess I'll have to do some research at some point in time. Does Georgia score? Here's my prediction. If Georgia scores 50, fans will say, why didn't they score 60? If Georgia scores 60, they'll say, why didn't they score 70? If they score 70, why didn't they score 80? Like, whatever Georgia scores on Saturday will be 10 points fewer than most fans want it to be. I'm halfway kidding, but you know what I mean. Crow King said watching Skip Bayless' reaction to Lincoln Riley going to LSU would be must watch. That'd probably be pretty funny. Tennille Calvino said she'd be surprised if Riley left the clean image of Oklahoma for the damaged goods of LSU. Here's the one thing I think is probably going on there, if anything is going on there. I think at some point in time, every coach wants to feel wanted. And, you know, Oklahoma is a proud program. Bob Stoops won a national championship. Barry Switzer won national championships. Bud Wilkinson had a 47-game winning streak. That's a program that expects to win as much as any program does. And another year for Riley that is going to finish without a national championship. At a certain point, even though he's kind of the darling of the media in a lot of ways, he's not winning at the championship level as much as Oklahoma fans think that program should be. So flirting with LSU, even if you don't take the job, it's just kind of a way of break checking all of that to say, hey, you know, just know this, I got more options here. So you may get tired of me, but I may get tired of you too. That's just kind of a coaching strategy that seems to exist. Robert Barnes says he wants to see the defense get a shutout against Charleston Southern. Yeah, that'd be another fun thing to be able to see. Jeremy, it's kind of funny. So Jeremy was in cover for the other night talking about this cardigan I used to wear. And it's funny that he brought that up. It actually kind of made me think about this. I'm going to make Jeremy so mad by saying this. So I actually got the cardigan back out the other day. I'm like, hey, this is pretty cool. I'm going to wear this thing again. So I'm going to wear that. And here's the other thing I'm going to wear. I found the other day the sweatshirt that y'all used to make fun of that had like the diagonal stripe that you said looked like a red coat uniform. I found that. I'm going to wear that again at some point. Y'all are going to love it. Y'all are going to love it. Y'all are going to love that. But I'm going to do that again. I'm going to make Jeremy mad because I'm going to wear that cardigan on the show. I may even wear it this week. It's kind of sweatshirt season. You know, it's one of those things where it kind of feels good to wear a sweatshirt right now. So I may do that. You Eat a Cookie remembers the band shirt. That's awesome. I'm glad you do. Jeremy says, don't do this to me, man. Thomas Tyson says, Lanning leaving is pretty much confirmed. Yeah, I don't know about that. But at a certain point, I mean, obviously people are going to get jobs. Wayne Kirkland wants to see Brock Vandegrift on Saturday. I'd hope so. It's hard to play 4 quarterbacks in a game, even against Charleston Southern. But I would hope that he would. I'd like to see him. All right, let me go to DawgNation.com. Then we're going to get off the air. Tom hopes that Tech Stadium is mostly red again. I did see where there's some tickets for sale still. Bob Zamblin says, how much will JT play on Saturday? That's a really good question. That's another guy you kind of want to see more of, just to see kind of what he looks like. So I'd like to see more of JT on Saturday there too. I hope so. Randy Hall's got 56-0. I'd take that. I'd be fine with that. Oh, Richard Dees has a good question. He says, what if Georgia beats Bama by 2 touchdowns? Yeah, Richard, now you're getting to the kind of thing where – so let's game this out for a moment. So let's say that if you got the 2-touchdown win against Georgia, if Georgia got the 2-touchdown win against Alabama, that – I think would come a lot closer to eliminating it from discussion. That if it's the close, razor-thin, tight game, exciting game, that there could be a lot of momentum for Alabama on something like that. But game this out for a moment. Let's say that Georgia's up 7 with 7 minutes to go. And in some respects, if you're Georgia, you're thinking about, okay, so what can we do to ensure we keep the 7-point win? But is there a thought process here of, well, what can we do to extend this lead in the hopes that we don't have to beat them again? Especially given the fact that a lot of people are going to tell you, 12-0 Georgia's a shoo-in. 12-1 Georgia would be a shoo-in for the college football playoff. No problem there whatsoever. That's a pretty interesting strategy to think about. That, I mean, did I see this where like Baylor kicking the extra field goal against Oklahoma the other day was related to a tiebreaker in the Big 12? Did I make this up, or is this a real thing? That, that's a round robin league. There's no divisions there. And so one of the tiebreakers is like point differential. And so that's why Baylor tried to extend its lead against Oklahoma. There's a chance I just totally made that up, but I believe I heard that or read it or something. So similarly speaking, would it be worth it for Georgia to risk losing to try to extend a lead against Alabama in the hopes that that would eliminate Bama? As I said before, Bama's like my Michael Myers. It's like you see them dead, but then you go peer over that balcony and all of a sudden they're gone. Now they're back moving around again and wreaking havoc. It's like if you have a chance to cut it off right there, go for the bigger win, but risk losing to do so. Would that be a risk worth taking, knowing that you could still make the playoff even if you lose the SEC championship game? That's a fun game theory to kind of think about. That's a fun game theory. Jermaine King says, Kirby's going to try to run the clock out. I know a lot of people will agree with Jermaine on that. Jermaine King also saying obviously the committee doesn't like two SEC teams in the playoff. And, it's not so much they hate the SEC. It's just that they think it's bad for business to have the SEC dominate college football as much as it does. So you've always got that working against you. Score Check says Notre Dame has an unfair advantage. No conference championship, more prep time, more time to get players healthy. I mean, that's kind of what Alabama also used in 2017 there as well. Tad Chiller says, who would win a wrestling match in their prime, King Kong Bundy or Jordan Davis? So there's no doubt that Jordan Davis is a lot more agile than a King Kong Bundy is. Like, who is the big man that you would compare Davis to in wrestling? He's way more agile than King Kong. I know why you're making the comparison because Davis is such a big guy, but Davis is a lot more of like I could see him going off the ropes a little bit or something like that. I mean, if Davis wrestled, I think he's I don't think he's just one of those squash in the corner, drop the big splash on you. I mean, avalanche type guys. I think he'd be moving around a little bit. Lambert Dog says, how do you find the previous 1st and 15 podcasts? This is a great question. And unfortunately, I do not believe 1st and 15s are archived. They might be. I've never thought about that. But obviously, the other video shows are archived on the platforms. But DawgNation.com is a little different than that. And we don't really put 1st and 15 on the podcast because we're trying to make it special just for this. That's a really good question, Lambert Dog. I don't know if there's a way to archive those or not. I've never thought about that. But it's a fair question to ask. So let me see if I can find that, and we'll see if we can give you an answer for that. All right, we're going to go. Anybody else? Anything else? We'll finish with Drew, who says, lifelong Dog fan here, 47 plus years. I don't think we beat Bama with Bennett at quarterback. Possibly just my opinion. We need that guy who can drive the ball downfield and convert third downs. That keeps them from keeping 7 or 8 in the box. You may be right about that. When we talk on this show about DawgNation unification, it comes with no guarantees. It comes with no guarantees. And the unification here is not around Stetson. It's around the fact that when you see a team that is first in points allowed per drive defensively, third in points scored per drive offensively, that just sort of feels like as good as I have a right to ask for. And who knows? Maybe there's another quarterback change coming at some point in time. Anything, I guess, seems possible. I'm okay with it being Stetson. I'm okay with it being JT. I can't guarantee that Stetson's going to lead Georgia to that victory, nor could I guarantee that JT is going to do that either. Once you get to December, especially with a grizzly bear like Alabama on the other side of the field, there just are no guarantees. But what I'm hopeful that DawgNation can say is we're going to unify around what Georgia believes about itself, and that those of us who don't have the ability to view all the things that this team sees about itself in practice every day, in meeting rooms every day, what's invisible to us but visible to them, can we unite around that? And this is where I always say, I do this show, it's the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. This is not the daily record of what media thinks. This is not the, daily mouthpiece for what the team once said. This is not. This is just the conversation that reflects what's going on with fans. I'm a fan. You're a fan. We're having a fan conversation together. That's just what we do around here. And from fan to fan, what I would say is it just kind of feels like the kind of thing where I don't know that we have much right to ask for much more than we've gotten from this Georgia team there thus far. And at this point in time, I'm just ready to buckle up and tape up and just see where it all lands. Some of you who have legitimate doubts, it may end up that, hey, it was just not quite meant to be for whatever reason. But I don't think there's anything that can be done to mitigate all of those doubts there either. It's going to be a very tense, nerve-wracking time. The week of the SEC championship, I might sleep 3 hours a night. I mean, it just may be one of those deals where it's just going to be crazy, crazy intense. And the rewards are up here. The depths of the loss would be down here. And you just got to keep on going. So fair commentary. But what we've chosen to do around here is we've chosen to unite around this team. We've chosen to cast our lot with what has been working for Georgia so far. I'm not talking about any individual player or any individual coaching decision. I'm talking about the entire collective of what has made Georgia work so well here this year. We don't do it because we have to. At least in my case, we do it because we want to. And we will see how it all works out. Fair commentary, fun comments all the way around. Big thanks to R.S. Andrews for making it possible. DawgNation.com, of course, for our 1st and 15, rsandrews.com for all of your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. Also, make sure you check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution at ajc.com there as well. They've always got great things going on, and make sure you follow all that. Big stuff happening around the world of sports. They got that covered for you there, too. You got runoff in the Atlanta mayoral race. The two candidates who are remaining having a debate coming up. So if you live in the Atlanta area, you have a chance to vote on that. Or if you just want to follow it, ajc.com for more on that. Also, you've heard about NFTs. The AJC is getting the NFT game. That's actually kind of cool. So you can check that out. And you got Michael Cunningham, Steve Hummer, great columnists looking at the Atlanta Falcons. Also, playoff rankings come out tonight. Obviously, the AJC will have a bunch on that, too, for you. Atlanta Journal-Constitution, ajc.com. Thanks for being here for DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Hope all of you have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning, 9:45 for 1st and 15, 10 a.m. for DawgNation Daily, presented by ESOG. We will talk to you then.